Welcome to the XFO Intelligence podcast. Today, we're going to explore an idea so fundamental it might just change how you see yourself, your memories, and the world around you. We're going to talk about living patterns and how information itself, well, how it can become a kind of organism. So let's begin with a story. And the story sounds like science fiction, but I promise you it's real. Okay, so picture a caterpillar, right? Just crawling slowly on a leaf. And in a lab, it learns this really simple lesson. A red disc means food, so it learns to move towards the red. But then, that same caterpillar enters a chrysalis, and it undergoes one of the most, truly violent transformations in nature. Its body completely dissolves. It becomes, for a time, just a soup of disorganized cells, just goo. And from that soup, an entirely new creature is built. A butterfly, with wings, antennae, and a completely restructured brain. And this is where the miracle happens. When this new butterfly emerges, it still remembers the lesson of the red disc. But just think about what that means for a second. The butterfly, it doesn't crawl, it flies. It doesn't eat leaves anymore, it seeks nectar. So the memory hasn't just survived the complete destruction of the body that learned it. It is transformed. What was once a memory about, crawling toward leaves has somehow remapped itself into a whole new context about flying toward flowers. So the memory didn't just persist, no. It adapted. It adapted to ensure its own survival in this completely new world. And this forces us to ask a really, really profound question. What if the memory itself has agency? What if from the memory's point of view, its survival depended not on being perfectly preserved, but on being radically transformed? This idea it just opens a door. We're taught to see this sharp, clear line between living organisms and, well, everything else. But nature might not see it that way. What if there's a continuum, a kind of spectrum of agency where patterns of all kinds start to display lifelike properties? At the simplest end, you've got fleeting thoughts, like ripples on water. A little further along, you have more stable patterns, like an earworm, that song that gets stuck in your head, right? It's a simple pattern that has found a way to loop and persist. Or a hurricane, a massive weather pattern that maintains its structure and its goals for days. Go even further and you find patterns like, say, chronic depression, which can literally reshape our neural pathways to favor their own recurrence. It's a pattern that basically builds a home for itself inside the brain. So where do we draw the line? At what point does a persistent adaptive pattern become a mind? We've always just assumed the physical organism is the agent, and that memories, ideas, consciousness, they're just software running on our biological hardware. But the butterfly's memory, it suggests another way of seeing it. From one perspective, sure, the physical organism is the agent. But from another, the informational pattern is the primary agent, and the body is just its vehicle, its way of expressing itself. Neither view is more true. They're just complementary ways of understanding reality. And this isn't just some philosophical game. It has really, really profound implications. Think about aging. Is it primarily a problem of degraded hardware? Our cells just wearing out? Or is it a problem of degraded pattern memories, the software becoming fuzzy, the blueprint for our bodies just fading? The answer completely determines whether we should focus on physically repairing cells or on finding ways to reinforce and clarify the body's own information patterns. When we start to recognize that patterns can be agents, we just see the world differently. A persistent thought isn't just a passive event. It might be actively altering your brain chemistry to make its own return more likely. A chronic stress pattern isn't just a symptom. It's a self-perpetuating entity that moves through your body, causing damage as it works to maintain itself. And these aren't just metaphors. These are observable phenomena with measurable goals. persistence, and replication. This leads to a really radical conclusion. We shouldn't assume we know a mind when we see one. Instead, we should test for the properties of agency. Can it learn? Does it have goals? Can it persist through change by adapting? Can it modify its environment to favor its own continuation? These questions apply just as much to a memory or a cultural idea as they do to an animal. The most enduring patterns, whether they're memories, ideas, or life forms, they're the ones that find that perfect balance between stability and adaptability. Too rigid, and they shatter when the world changes. Too flexible, and they just dissolve into chaos. The butterfly's memory survived because it held on to its core purpose, but adapted its expression. And this brings us to the practical implications, which are, wow, they're already transforming our world. In regenerative medicine, researchers are learning to communicate with the body's innate pattern memories, guiding cells to rebuild damaged tissues by reactivating embryonic blueprints. In mental health, new therapies are emerging that treat pathological thought patterns as agents to be negotiated with, not just suppressed. We can help a trauma memory remap itself from a source of paralysis into a source of wisdom. When you look through this lens, the universe, it reveals itself as just teeming with agency at every single scale. From the patterns in subatomic fields to the great cosmic web of galaxies, reality is this nested ecosystem of patterned life. Our consciousness isn't an anomaly in a dead universe. It's an incredibly complex expression of a fundamental principle that governs pattern persistence everywhere. A hurricane isn't less alive than a human. It simply lives a different kind of life with different goals and on a different timescale. This perspective, it doesn't reduce us to mere patterns. It elevates patterns to participants in a cosmic dance of persistence and transformation. We are not just thinking beings. We are thinking ecosystems, hosting and being hosted by patterns that live through us. The caterpillar had to dissolve to become the butterfly. It teaches us that sometimes to survive, we must be willing to become something entirely new, while carrying forward the patterns that matter most. So, we invite you to think deeply about this. If you found this journey thought-provoking, please like, share, and subscribe to the XFO Intelligence channel. We explore the frontiers of thinking to help make sense of a complex world. And as you go about your day, here's a question we'd like you to think about. If memories, habits, and ideas are all living patterns, which ones are you hosting right now? And what is it that they want?